This is the Holy Gospel according to St. John, the 10th chapter. Jesus said, I'm the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, who is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them. The hired hand runs away because the hired hand does not care for the sheep. I'm the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that don't belong to this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life in order to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it up again. I've received this command from my Father. This is the gospel of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
God's grace, mercy, and peace be yours through Christ our Savior and Lord. Amen. So about a year ago, went down to the Holdeclager Lilac Garden. I'm sure a lot of you have been in. Most everybody's been there, and down in Woodland. It's that time of year again, and I was just remembering because the lilacs are in bloom again. A little bit early this year, given the weather, but we decided last year when we were down there that it would be fun with the birth of our son to buy a lilac and plant it. And, you know, as they grow, see which grows faster, you know. Be able to tell him, we planted this the same time you were born, and he can go, it's taller than me, oh no, you know, that kind of thing. So if you've been there, you know that they sell some lilacs, but they also have an area in their sale area where with clearance lilacs. Ones where like the tag has fallen off or the plant's looking a little run down. And we decided, why not? It's only $5. Let's get one of these clearance ones as well. So we got two. We got one that we really liked, and then we got a clearance one. Went home and planted them. And we were really eager to see, here we're almost a year later, just shy of a year later, and to see with this beautiful one and find out what this mystery one was. Well, you can't tell during the winter what it's going to turn out to be because it's winter. Things are mostly dormant. You know, maybe a few leaves. But this mystery lilac, we'll call it, this mystery plant, through the winter, grew and grew and grew and grew and grew and grew. And it became a tree taller than our gutters on the house. I think we discovered Jack's magic beanstalk here with this plant. It was crazy. This thing has gone nuts. And I was really excited. I'm thinking, wow, look at this huge lilac. I can't wait till it blooms and to see the flowers on this thing. No flowers. Where are the flowers? Dulcie, can you come look at this thing? So we looked at this plant and we realized that the leaves are similar, but they're not the same. And we determined that, it's not actually a lilac. And on closer investigation, we realized way down at the bottom, there's a separate plant trying desperately to grow with blooms on it. So there was no way to know that this massive plant, there was no way to know in the middle of winter that this was actually what Dulcie came to refer to as a weed tree. We got us a weed tree. It's a tall, pretty weed tree, but it's a weed tree. And this poor lilac way down at the bottom, it's trying to bloom. It's trying to climb through the tree, but the tree is overwhelming this darn thing. She said, honey, it's a weed tree, cut it down. I said, but it's a pretty tree. She said, it's a weed tree, cut it down. Okay. Well, you know, the lilac couldn't take off because this other thing was stealing all the sunlight, stealing all the nutrients, and this poor little lilac couldn't grow. And that's kind of what our first lesson is about today. Not about gardening and lilacs, but about being able to identify what we're working with. More specifically, finding out whether our faith is a genuine faith. Finding out whether the faith that we have, the trust in God that we have, is really a helpful faith or maybe not so helpful. The second lesson today is all about that. It's the book of 1 John. I don't know that I've ever preached on the book of 1 John. Didn't know a whole lot about 1 John. It's part of this section of the New Testament that's generally referred to as the letters, the epistles or letters. And being that there's 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, being that they share the same name as the Gospel of John, most people have assumed they're the same writer. The guy sat down, he wrote the gospel about Jesus' life, about the good news of Jesus' death and resurrection, and then a little later on he wrote these letters. Well, scholars actually looked at these letters and they said, there's some differences here. The gospel has a certain kind of vocabulary, a certain language, and it seems to have a certain emphasis. And looking at 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, they're a little different. So I'm not sure that they were necessarily the same author. The Gospel of John is written to an audience of Christians that are this little community in the midst of a Jewish crowd. They're in Jerusalem. They're people trying to follow Jesus, but most of the culture around them, most of the people around them are Jewish. And so the Gospel is saying, don't give up hope in Jesus. Continue to remember what Jesus taught you, even though everybody else around you is doing something a little bit different. Even though they're carrying on the old traditions and Jesus has changed our routines a little bit, don't give up hope. 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John are written to an established Christian community. And they're written, basically people have tried to carry on Jesus' teachings, and some of those teachers have started to shift the focus, have started to stray from the original message. And so 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, especially 1st John, is saying, let's get back to basics. Basics of who Jesus was, of what he taught us, and of who we are called to be. Let's get back to basics. That's where we find our lesson today, verse 16. Jesus was the one who gave his life for us. He showed us what love means. He demonstrated this. We know what love is because that's who Jesus was. And verse 17, how can you say that you have a strong, helpful faith if you see a need of somebody around you and you don't do something to help? If you don't jump in and help them out? How can you say that God actually lives in you, that your faith is alive and active? And verse 18, let's not love with words and with speech. Let's love with actions and in truth. This is who we are called to be. And 1 John is kind of setting up this litmus test. He said that's the test to find out whether you have a beautiful, vibrant, amazing faith that will carry you through anything, that will carry you into glory. Or whether you got yourself a weed tree. Whether you see a need of somebody during the week and actually offer a kind word, offer to help them out in some way. That's what vibrant, true, real faith is, as opposed to just letting the opportunity go on by. And it doesn't have to be as dramatic as seeking out something crazy to spend all your time doing. You don't have to adopt every needy child in the world. Sometimes it's as simple as simply withholding judgment. We all see people during the week do things that we don't understand, things that irritate us. And the challenge this week is to withhold judgment. Maybe you don't even say anything directly to them. Maybe you just say in your head, oh, that idiot. We've all done it. But that's a judgment. That's a judgment. We're called not to judge. Instead, say something like, well, that's a different choice. That's a different choice than I would make. Maybe there's more to the story that I'm not aware of. Maybe there's a reason they did something that doesn't make sense to me. And if you're feeling real bold, maybe offer to help them out and see if there is, in fact, more to that story. I came across this great article this week. Like I said, the sermon found me. This just hit me right between the eyes. I thought it was really powerful. I don't know how many people are aware, but there's a trend right now that's happens in social media and happens all around the place, referred to as parent shaming. There's a lot of shaming that happens, and parent shaming has become more common. Basically, people say, you shouldn't do that. You're not like... Several years ago, I remember that you wouldn't dare criticize another parent, at least not to their face. You may have some thoughts privately, but parenting is such a personal thing. And it's so touchy that, but now people are getting more proactive in pointing out things and shaming. And I don't know if it's mostly social media. There are stories that go around about kids being affected by neglect. And I don't know that the neglect is necessarily happening more often, but we're hearing the stories more often. So we feel like, oh, we better keep watch, better be more vigilant. And what it means is that total strangers are more willing to criticize and judge and sometimes even get involved. And the problem is, as an outsider seeing something and judging it, you may not have all the information. You may not know the whole story, and that judgment can do more damage than good. And that's where this article comes in. We were exhausted, tired, and emotionally raw. Our little boy was finally stable and home from the hospital. He was in so much pain that I was actually surprised and relieved that he'd finally fallen asleep. He was almost 2 and had given us quite a scare. His feet seemed to stop working, and he vomited relentlessly until it became red and streaked with blood. Terrifying for a parent. He had no fever, and every test yielded normal results. His discharge papers read, undiagnosed, suspected underlying neurological condition. We were given referrals to neurology and GI, prescriptions, and we were sent home. And I remember it was a beautiful summer day that day, and our little boy slept in the carrier as we walked to the pharmacy to fill his prescriptions. Standing on the corner waiting for the light to change, I became so lost in thought, wondering what could possibly be wrong with my precious little boy, that I almost didn't hear her. My husband's abrupt, "Excuse me?" snapped me out of it. I looked up to see the whole street corner staring at us. I felt immediate confusion by the appalled look on the woman's face. What happened? Did we do something wrong? I couldn't think of anything. We were just standing there waiting for the light. She had this aggressive body language, matched only by the angry look on my husband's face. "I said he's old enough to walk," she said, gesturing to my child sleeping soundly against my husband's chest. I stood looking at her, my mouth literally gaping. Did she really just say that? People were staring at us, waiting to hear what we had to say. I instantly became self-conscious, wondering if everyone felt this way. I spent the last week in this nightmare, and I'd just been told that my sweet child probably had a mysterious neurological disorder, and now I felt like the whole world was judging me for it. We stood there silent. It was as if we both decided simultaneously that she wasn't worth engaging. My husband's jaw was tight, and I could tell that he was upset, but he turned his head and ignored her. Apparently our child in the carrier was too much for this woman to take. She reached out and tapped my husband on the shoulder, forcing him to acknowledge her. "You are not doing him any favors treating him like that," she snapped. "He should be walking." I was truly caught off guard. I was humiliated as I looked around at all the people staring at us. Was she really questioning us as parents? Especially after all we'd been through to help him? Could this one act of carrying our sick son be enough to annoy the whole world and announce that we were not doing right by him? I felt so judged, so isolated, so misunderstood. It made me feel all alone and inadequate. I wanted to do more for him, but how could I? I was already giving him all that I could. Standing on this corner looking at this woman, I tried to think of something clever to say to make her understand. But in my emotionally exhausted state, the only thing that came was stunned silence. My husband, however, was not as lost for words as I. He said to her softly yet firmly, "Not that it's any of your business, but he has some neurological issues and was just released from the hospital earlier today. So no, he can't walk right now." There was an audible gasp among the audience. No one expected this response, and all eyes turned to the woman to see what she would have to say next. She was stunned. Her indignant self-righteousness was fading, but it wasn't gone. She looked at my husband, still holding her aggressive posture, and said flippantly, "Well, I didn't know that." I was surprised by this response. It was as if her lack of knowledge made her actions justifiable. "No, you didn't," my husband retorted. "And you may want to consider the fact that the next time you feel the urge to walk up to parents and publicly judge and insult them, we're doing everything possible for our sick child. The only one not doing him any favors is you." And with that, she turned around and walked away quickly. This short interaction had a lasting impression on me, and not just because of her audacity, but because I can relate to what she was thinking. While I have never walked up to a mom and criticized her, I've thought of things myself not too dissimilar, and it made me feel really bad. Here I was in an extraordinary situation, wishing that others would understand, and I was guilty of thinking the same kind of things as she had on other occasions. My husband's words hit me like a hammer. I'd silently judged without stopping to think maybe I didn't have all the information. The thought that I could have dismissed a mother in desperate need of support, a mother like myself, that deeply bothered me. It was not too long after I witnessed a scene in the cereal aisle at the grocery store. A woman was standing there watching her son flip out, doing nothing to control the situation. He was maybe 4 and was sitting on the floor, screaming at the top of his lungs, hands over his ears, rocking back and forth. And she stood there watching. A man walked by and scoffed at her. He was trying to maneuver his cart around the screaming child. He said, "Lady, control your kid. Some of us are trying to shop." Now, personally, if this were my kid, I'd pick him up and leave the store. A week ago, I would have probably been thinking something like, why isn't she removing him from the store? But just coming off of my public judgment on the street corner, I decided to change my approach of silent disapproval. I too had something to say to her, so I walked up and said it. "Don't worry," I said in my most sympathetic tone. "This was my whole day yesterday. Gotta love life with toddlers." The woman said nothing. "Honestly," I continued, "it happens to all of us. Don't worry about it," I said, gesturing to the man who was now farther down the aisle. The woman broke into tears. She explained that her son was recently diagnosed with autism, and he would freak out for unknown reasons right now in the cereal aisle. She had no idea what triggered the episode or what to do about it. She did know that touching him or trying to move him would only worsen the hysteria. My heart broke with her story. This woman was in an extraordinarily difficult situation and doing everything she could, and sadly, she was only met with judgment. As I reached out for my Cheerios, I told her to hang in there. I reassured her that she was doing a good job, and that she was a good mother. To my surprise, she grabbed me and hugged me and said, "I really needed to hear that today." Her words hit my heart and echoed what I felt so many times before. Over the years, I continue to think back to those two events, and they've been forever burned into my soul. Because these two random encounters, I feel compelled to offer words of encouragement to parents who I catch publicly struggling. I force myself to smile approvingly at parents who seem to be doing the odd or unconventional, and I'm constantly surprised. I've met a wide range of unexpected and extraordinary circumstances. The 8-year-old girl who was saying mean things to her mom in the kitchen store was angry that her dad had just been deployed to war. The mom who was indulging her son with candy every time he fussed was fighting cancer and had no energy for a battle of wills. The dad who was on his phone at the park while his son begged to be pushed on the swing had just lost his own mother. In years past, I might have silently disapproved of these interactions, but because of one mean stranger, I was able to offer words of encouragement, load a tired cancer patient's car for her, push a grieving man's son on a swing. The more extraordinary situations I uncover, the more I realize that at one time or another, we're all fighting something extraordinary. Things that make us feel alone and desperate. And desperate times call for desperate measures. When these things happen, we do what we must to survive. And sometimes that means our parenting choices look a little strange. There are times when the world feels harsh, and we need it to be kind. I truly believe that if anyone should have compassion, it's parents for other parents. What we really need is support, not judgment. So to the random lady on the street, I can't thank you enough for making me realize this. You hurt me and embarrassed me, but you made me realize that I was guilty of forgetting that my battle is not an isolated one. You reminded me that we all struggle and that none of us have the whole picture. You changed how I see others and how I approach them. You connected me to my community and gave me compassion for the unconventional. But mostly, you opened my eyes and helped me see something extraordinary. This is true today of parenting, but that's just one world. And we could say this is true of all people, that all of us are fighting battles of one kind or another. And our second lesson today reminds us, let's not love with words or with speech, but with actions and in truth. And this is how we know that we belong to the truth and how we set our hearts at rest in His presence. This is how we'll know that we have a strong, vibrant, beautiful faith, a faith that will carry us through any circumstances. This is how we will know that we are living out the gospel, that we are being the people that God created us to be. This is how we will know that we are not a weed tree simply taking up space. When we put love into action. When we have patience, when we show kindness, when we offer support. May God help you to bloom this week and have a vibrant, beautiful faith and live out his love with all you can.